So thank you all for being here. I know that December can be a hectic month. So we are glad that all of you made time to be here this morning. My name is Kate Wallace. This is Coffee Chat, hosted by the CalSega Ambassador Committee. Today we're talking about building company culture, and we have the always popular speaker with us, Ann Laguza of The Works Consulting. So she'll be here with us today. I also have my colleague, Ali Moyer, who is CalSega's Director of Communications, who's on this morning as well. So thank you all of you for joining. You may know, or you may not, this might be your first Coffee Chat that you're joining, but Coffee Chat is our brand new event that we just launched earlier this year in February. So this is our fourth Coffee Chat for 2022, hosted by the Ambassador Committee, as I mentioned. And then we also, if you were at the annual conference, I hope that you joined us for the Jeopardy and networking that we did. That got really good reviews. So we'll plan to do that again for 2023. So I am going to do just a quick little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll turn it over to Ashley Cervantes, who is our Ambassador Committee Chair. Thank you to those of you who felt comfortable to turn your cameras on. If you'd like to turn your camera on, please do that. We do ask, just for the sake of keeping the chaos at a minimum, that you keep yourself muted. What we're going to do in just a minute, after I turn it over to Ashley and she introduces Ann, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll just so we can get a feel for who's here. And thank you to those of you who submitted questions in advance. So we'll launch that in just a minute. If you want to have your camera on, great, so we can see your face. If you'd rather keep your camera off, that's fine too. At the end of the presentation, there will be some time for networking. So we'll divide into Zoom rooms. And each room will either have a CalSega staff member or an Ambassador Committee member, so we can digest a little bit what Ann delivers to us and process, and hopefully bounce some ideas off of each other. So thank you again for joining us this morning. Thank you to my colleague Ali and our Ambassador Committee for putting these events on this year. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley Cervantes, who is our Ambassador Committee Chair.
Thank you so much, Kate. It is such a pleasure to do our fourth Coffee Chat and have all of you on with us. This has been such a great success, and we've gotten such wonderful feedback, as Kate mentioned. None of this would be possible without my wonderful committee. I am so thankful to the Ambassador Committee. We are a small but mighty committee that put together some really awesome stuff in the last year, with the goal ultimately to enhance membership for all of you. Initially, when the committee started out, we were working on recruitment efforts to recruit new members to CalSega, and when COVID happened, we switched gears a little bit. So a giant shout out to my committee and newly appointed co-chair, Justin Frazier, who's on with us today. Thank you so much, Justin, for being here. And I do have a few other committee members. I can't see everyone who's on the way my screen is formatted right now, so I'll just give them a quick shout out. So I have Manny Jimenez, I have Conrad Lavoit, and Adrian is the newest member of our team, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to join us today. No, Conrad won't. Unfortunately, he had another obligation, but they are a wonderful asset to this committee and to everything we're going to do here today. But let's get to it. We have some really exciting things that we're going to be talking about with the ever popular Ann Laguza. Before we dive into that, Kate is going to help me, and we're going to get some poll questions launched, because I think it's really helpful for all of us to be able to see and know who we're engaged with. So the questions that should have appeared on your screen now are: who's on today? Who are you? Which category do you fit into? And you have a couple options there. So if you select the other option, please be sure to type in the chat. Maybe if you don't fit into that human resources professional bucket, you're maybe not a company owner of a smaller company, you don't fit into the security management bucket, which bucket do you fit in? Or maybe you just want to say, Ashley, I don't fit into a bucket at all. That's not who I am. Don't put me in a box. That's fine too. The second poll question there: would you classify yourself or anyone on your team as having experienced burnout? So there could be a million reasons why you clicked to register and committed to joining today's Coffee Chat. I assume many of you decided to join because maybe you have experienced burnout, or maybe you're worried about folks on your team who are experiencing burnout or have maybe experienced burnout and it's affected your turnover. Everybody wants to know about recruitment and how do we get more officers. But Anne loves to talk about how do we keep the ones you work so hard to get in the first place? And burnout absolutely affects that. So that's the second question. Third question, what do you hope to get out of today's coffee chat? And I'm just really curious. So I'm going to give everybody just another moment to respond. And then I'd love if Kate, if we're able, if we get a large enough percentage of people completing it in the next moment, if you have the ability to share the results with everyone so that we can kind of see who is on today and know who all we're talking to. All right. What do we think? Where are we at, Kate?
Well, so I just marked in the chat, I said, those of you who answered to the question number 2, how would you classify your burnout status, that you're thriving? There's 2 of you that marked that. Please, in the chat, tell us your secrets. We want to know what you're doing to avoid burnout. So it looks like 35%. Oh, Anne was one of them. That's not a surprise. All right, Anne, you're about to tell us your secrets, but the other 1%, you let us know your secrets. So 35% of those who are here with us today are HR professionals, 23% are company owners, 39% security manager, and then just 1 person said that they don't fall into any of those categories. Unfortunately, to the question about burnout, 39% of you said definitely yes, you're experiencing burnout, or you're having burnout. You have experienced it rather. 45% said yes, somewhat to that question. 10% said not really, and 2, so Anne and 1 other person said, not me, I'm thriving. So I am excited for those 2 people. I'm very happy for you and only a little jealous. Question number 3, what do you hope to get out of today's coffee chat rather? 23% said year-end tips, 29% said to sharpen their management and people skills, 3% said hey and tips. I almost guarantee that Ashley was one of those people who marked that. 6% said networking and coffee. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Please stay for the networking at the end. We don't want to put anybody on the spot. If that's not your thing, then you don't have to stay. But if it's not, I would maybe challenge you, stay for a little bit. It's going to be a smaller group of people, at least hear the other introductions, and then, oh, maybe you have to go. Maybe you have a call and you can't stay, but at least challenge yourself, stretch yourself a little bit. 61% said all of the above. So year-end tips, sharpening management skills, hey and tips, and networking. So, and then 1 other person said something else. So let us know if you're comfortable. Let us know in the chat what you're hoping to get out of the presentation today.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you everyone for participating in that poll. It's really fascinating to be able to see, where everyone is at as we're talking through these topics today, because I mean, as you just heard, everybody is on kind of a different, we're all over the map, right? And there's some underlying themes that I'm sure we could pull out if we were able to interview each and every one of you and figure out, where's your team at and how did you get there? So the goal today is to pull out at least 1 golden nugget, right? That's Barry's magic saying, and become one of my mantras when I'm attending workshops like this, or rather, listening in on conversations like these, or attending workshops or conferences. So, Anne, today we're here to talk about company culture. This is obviously a huge topic we can't cover in less than an hour. So to kick us off, let me ask you this. What is company culture?
Oh my goodness. I love that you said we can't cover it in an hour. So good morning, everybody, since I haven't said hello. Okay, so company culture is really from sort of top to bottom, how you want your culture, how you want your, I should say, sorry, your organization to feel, your company to feel. And it starts with your values. You can have a brand that you're trying to sort of show off, I guess is a good way to put it. And it's something that permeates from the top all the way to the frontline person. And so Everybody is very, very clear on what the culture is. And you all experience places that have a very clear culture. If any of you have been to Disneyland or any of the Disney adventure parks, they have a very clear culture that the people that are, sweeping the park all the way up to the top understand what their mission is, what their experience they're supposed to be creating for their guests, I think is what they call them, et cetera. And you all have experienced that in different companies, that they have a very specific culture. So that's kind of what it is. It's something that you can actually feel, in terms of maybe not like literally touch, but when you walk into an organization, you can feel it. And maybe more importantly, I can really feel when there's a disconnect, when you're telling me what your culture is, but that is not the way you're treating your employees and your clients, et cetera.
Yeah, I really like that imagery, right? It's not tangible, but it's absolutely, it's like the air we breathe almost is kind of the visual that I was getting as you were describing it. Not necessarily something that you touch, but absolutely something that's present and around us all the time.
Right.
That's crazy. I wrote down the word as you were talking, feelable, like it's
Yeah.
feelable. I love inventing new words. Um,
Right.
yeah, and it's interesting because I know a lot of security folks, we tend to be, very practical, very pragmatic, very black and white, very logistical. And so when I say a word like feelable, I know some of you could probably cringe, right? You're probably like, that's not a real thing. And yet here we are with so many people that want to hear about it because it affects those tangible, very real things.
Mhm.
So it's kind of fascinating. And I'm excited to dive more
Sure.
into that. Oh, I feel like you were
Yeah,
about to
no,
say
for
something.
sure. I mean, and I was going to say that, in the security industry, for as long as I've been in it and around it, sometimes I think that it's like, well, we just do security. Like, what do you mean? But every single one of you got into the business for a certain reason, whether you're an owner or an employee or, a manager, whatever your role is. And you want to think about, like, kind of go back to that. What is that about? And then really trying to define that experience that you want people to have.
Well, something I've taken away from you over the years, and I love that you dislike templates. For anybody who's listened to Anne any number of times, or even just one time, I'm sure she's dropped a line in there about how templates really aren't ideal for a number of reasons. And this is kind of one of those things I think of, right? So one of the practical things that all of us have, and certainly if you don't have one, you need to call Anne right away, but our employee handbooks, right? And so this is
Yeah.
a very black and white, very practical thing. But the things you put in or don't put in your handbook are a part of your culture, or they become a part of your culture, right? And we talk all the time about like scope creep, right? Or
Mhm.
things that are become practices that you do every day but aren't actually in your handbook, or they aren't actually in your post orders. So it's really interesting how, I mean, what are your thoughts, Anne, on how all of that plays into company culture, or does it?
It totally does. And I think that there's like a missed opportunity there that a lot of people are throwing away, because you're sort of looking at the handbook like, okay, check, my attorney told me I need it. So here's this document, and whatever, I did it, get it away from me. I have been reading, well, so the end of the year, I say it, we're equivalent to sort of how CPAs are during their busy tax season. We are reviewing so many handbooks right now because we have laws changing January 1st. So there's an extra pressure. We review them every year, it seems like, at this time, but this year there's tremendous pressure to get them all done. And I have seen an organization that has 20 people that has a 99-page handbook. And I've seen an organization that they have about 100 people and they have a 35-page handbook. And I'm always concerned about these handbooks that are 99 pages. And on, page 45, it says, how do you talk to the media if they ask you? Well, if that's a big deal for your company, if you happen to be in a high exposure company where a lot of employees might be getting asked questions from the media, page 45 is not going to come up for them when they get asked what to say to the media. So I think what I really want people to start spending more time is those first 3 to 5 pages. Maybe it doesn't have to be quite that long, but should be talking about the culture. How do you want people to act? How do you want them to communicate with each other? How do you want them to communicate with your clients? What kind of environment, what do you want to be known for in the security industry? When, when people, I always say, when you're out of the room, how do you want people to talk about you? Right. And I want people to spend more time up front talking about that and really defining their values and being really clear. Again, values, somebody just sent me their values. There were like 15 of them. And I said, okay, I'm going to do something really quick. I'm like, tell me what your values are without looking at them. And it was like, well, and they got like 3 of them. I'm like, rethink your values. Like, if you can't even remember what they are, then you're never going to be able to reinforce those in your environment. You're just not, because you can't remember what they are. I don't care how many you have. I guess I do care if you can't remember, but the most important thing is that they're memorable and you can easily repeat them and your employees can easily remember them so that they know how to behave. But handbooks are just making me crazy right now and I understand, I totally get that there's a cost issue with having someone like myself do a handbook versus just going and grabbing a template online. And I understand that sometimes you're going to have to pick costs maybe over culture at the moment, but try not to, I guess. I would say if you have to pick that template, then spend that extra time to put a few pages in the front that really talk about your culture. But yeah, it is a huge thing. Your handbook, every form, every handbook, every single thing that your employees touch should feel, again, like your company and should be part of the culture.
I love that. Okay. We have all heard you talk, or many of us have heard you talk a little bit about work-life balance not actually existing. So as we kind of shift gears and remember, folks listening in, all of this ties into and back to company culture. So I promise we'll make a beautiful circle. But can you explain to us, what does that mean? If work-life balance doesn't truly exist, we're talking about burnout, we're talking about how it impacts company culture.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I know I was listening to those numbers about like burnout and then sort of somewhat burnout. I was like, that's a high number that we have reported there. So, a lot of people talk about work-life balance. Oh, you've got to have a work-life balance. I just think that's non-existent. I think we should stop trying to pursue balance. I think doing that in and of itself creates more stress and burnout. I think that it's sort of an ebb and a flow, as you might want to say. I think that sometimes things are going to be a little more work oriented, and hopefully, if they should be, sometimes they're going to be a little more personal oriented or life oriented. So it moves, right? And I think that the important thing that everyone has to pay attention to is the way it's moving good for you? Like, do you feel good? Do you feel energized? Is it good for your family, right? If you're like, yeah, I feel good, I'm working, 60% of the time and 40% of the time is spent on family things, but every time you go home, your significant other's screaming at you because, you're not around and you're not helping them out or whatever. Well, then that's not really a great, and I don't want to use the word, but that's not a great, I don't want to use the word balance, but that isn't a great percentage breakdown for you because that's stressful, right? And this has been like the wildest time, right? So I've been doing this now, it'll be, 32 years in January. The last 2 years is like some of the wildest stuff I've ever seen. We are talking about things we've never talked about, right? Like asking people, so you're sick? Like, what kind of sick are you? Well, do you have COVID? Like, show me a test, just all the stuff that couple years ago, we would have been like, don't talk to them about how they're, what's wrong with them. And don't ask them for medical documentation. And, and now we're like, yeah, ask them all these questions. And I think people are tired. I really do. I think there's a lot of people I talk to on a daily basis that are tired. And the way to sort of get that back is you've got to see where in your life it's not right for you. Like, where is the percentage that you're missing, that you're not getting that kind of that rejuvenation or that ability to come back. Oh, and I'll give you some examples. If it's like, oh, I used to work out, all the time. I used to be able to work out 3 days a week and I just never have time to do that anymore. Well, if that was really bringing you a lot of joy, then you're going to have to find a way to get that back in, right? That's really important. If it's like, maybe you're more focused on family right now because you have to be, but that's really affecting your work and it's causing things to not go so well at work, then you're going to want to look at that and say, okay, what is it that's going on in my family that's taking all my time and attention or more time and attention? And what do I need to do to try to either resolve that situation or make it better so that I can feel better when I'm at work, so I'm not always feeling behind and chasing emails. And I will say that a lot of this comes down to time management, and nobody wants to hear that because everyone thinks there's something magical to do to get that perspective that you need in your life.
What?
And there just isn't. I know. And the reason that's why when I said to Kate, like I'm thriving in it, I've really worked on this really hard for the last 12 to 24 months, is really finding a way. First of all, I love what I do. So that's huge for me. But I will say that people who know me would tell you I work a little too much. So I've been listening to that, and I've been wanting to make sure that I have enough fun going on in my life. But it's all come down to managing my schedule and like being almost ruthless with like not budging on it. I mean, I give you an example. It's so like right now. Okay. So right now, everybody's like holiday parties and going out and let's have drinks and all that. Well, I am I go to bed really early. Like I am literally in bed between 8:30 and 9. I am in my bed and I am asleep no later than 10 o'clock because I get up really early and I feel my best. I mean, this is I don't drink a ton because I just don't. That's just me. But during this time, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'll stay out. No big deal. Yeah, I'll have another drink. But I am like ruthless on everybody knows when they go out with me. They're like, well, we got to go a little earlier because Anne's going to have to leave by like 8:30. And I'm like, so true. Like that is me. But, and like I said, it's not for everybody. Some people are like, well, I don't want to live like that. But you have to figure out what works for you. For me, that works for me because then I know I feel fresh. I feel great tomorrow. I'm able to give my team 100%. And I'm still able to spend time with people I really care about, and have a good time. I just do it in moderation, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for a lot of security professionals and especially, the owners on this call, it's so easy. Anne describes, if you have never heard this before, and I've taken this on as my own, but it truly stemmed from Anne, as the security time, or time and security, is a lot like dog years, right? We work 365. We're open 24/7. If you're an owner, you're a manager out in the field, you're taking calls at 2 a.m., you're up at 8 a.m. for meetings. Like you go nonstop. And much like Anne, we're all you're not in this industry if you're not passionate about it, right? Or you certainly don't last very long. And so you're passionate about it, and so you do it, and then it, just like Anne kind of recapped for us, right? And then it starts impacting these other areas of our lives, and we're trying to figure it out. So my question to you, Anne, is, do you feel like when we presume that there is such a thing as a work-life balance and that it's actually achievable, that actually ends up impacting burnout? Or how would you describe that relationship?
Yeah, like I think that starts to cause more stress because you're wondering, like, why can't I achieve this thing, this work-life balance? And I really, like I said, I don't really think it's ever 50-50. I think it moves around like a teeter-totter almost, something like that, or a seesaw, or whatever you call it what do they call it now, Ashley? What do kids call it now?
I think they call it still a teeter-totter.
Okay.
That's what I still call it.
I've reached that age where I'm like, what do the kids call it now? I just know she has children. So, but yeah, but like it does, and it does cause stress. And I think that if you're hearing people say to you like, oh, you've got to have more balance, I don't believe it. I don't believe anyone has real balance. I think that, like I said, it continues to move around, and there's times that we're going to be drawn one way or the other. But the most important thing is you're paying attention to how you feel. If you're tired every day and if you have like a shorter fuse, right? You're like losing your temper a little more. You don't have patience with the employees. You're not able to implement things you want to do. I think you have to pay attention to all that, or you're not, and go back to your family. Maybe you're missing out on things that are important in your family or things that are important in your personal life. Then you have to pay attention to that, and you have to make shifts. But the tough part is it's not like I can go, oh, all you have to do is just this one little thing and everything will be perfect again. You really have to work at it, but it is about drawing those boundaries and kind of staying ruthless about them.
Yeah, I love that word and I love that description. So that might have been a little mind-blowing for some people if they've always, if you've been working so hard for so long trying to achieve some work-life balance and this perfect 50-50. So following that segue, can you share with us what are some of your tips? I mean, you talked about being ruthless, knowing those boundaries, kind of knowing yourself, but what are some practical tips that we can use to effectively manage our time? Maybe even starting with something like meeting management. I know you have some great meeting management practical tips for us.
Yeah, so one of the very first things you can do is I would look at your schedule and honestly look at all the meetings that you have and try to really identify what is the purpose of this meeting. And if the purpose of the meeting is just so you know what's going on, right? And I'm kind of putting that in quotes on purpose. Is there another way to get that information? And I'm not a fan of like, oh, I'm going to have my employee write me a 3-page email every day and tell me what's going on. I don't really want you to do that, but like, what is the intention of this meeting? What do I need to get out of it? Is there a faster, more concise way to do it? So looking at, can you shorten your meetings? Shorten them by 5 minutes at a time. Everyone goes to this hour meeting. So I'll tell you this, a client the other day said, I need to meet with you. And I said, okay, how much time do you need? By the way, that's a tip. Start asking people that question. How much time do you think you need? Or how much time do you think we'll need? She said, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, how about 45 minutes? And she said, I said, do you think you'll need an hour? That was my mistake, actually. And then she said, I'm sure I can fill an hour. And I said, no. Let's go for 45 minutes then. And she said, 45 minutes. I said, yeah, we're going to be super efficient. And she's like, okay. Like she was all about it. So ask people how much time they need or how much time they'll think they need so that you could, and then be willing to negotiate it. Try to figure out what the purpose of the meetings are and where can you start to eliminate them, or like I said, even reduce them 5 minutes at a time. We always feel like meetings need to be like 30 minutes or an hour. Someone I know does 20-minute meetings. I'm not lying. And you better get on in and out in 20 minutes or they're going to be gone. They're a very efficient business owner. You get 20 minutes when you ask for a meeting, and it's better be something super special to ask for more time than that. So, but even if you were like, let's do 55 minutes, because you know what? That 5-minute break that you get is going to impact you so much because you're going to be able to take a drink of water, go to the restroom, take a breath before your next meeting, whatever it is, organize your notes.
Do that? What?
I know. I know when so I coach a lot of leaders, right? And I'm like, show me your calendar. And it's like all back to back to back to back to back. I'm like, where's your break time? Like, when do you have lunch? And people are like, lunch? So think about shortening your meetings. Something I had shared with Ashley, what she's talking about is there's a meeting that I attend where they use the free version of Zoom. And the reason they do that is because there's an automatic, I think it's at 40 minutes still. It's an automatic cutoff time. And it's a pretty big meeting like this. And everybody knows it's 40 minutes and literally the Zoom cuts you off. So if you're in the middle of a sentence, you're in the middle of a sentence. So you get what you get in that meeting. So it's really taught people to be super efficient. So definitely think about cutting back your meeting times, eliminating any meetings that are just no one even knows why you're going anymore. Remove yourself from meetings where maybe you don't need to be anymore. Allow someone on your team to attend and provide you with feedback after, if you can get out of that. So that would be good. The other thing I'll say is scheduling an email time is a huge lifesaver. Again, I know it's one of the hardest things for people to do. So one of the things that people start to feel very stressed and burned out over is that their whole day is run by their email, right? So if your email is very busy all day, you're responding all day, and you get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I do today? I didn't do anything on my list. Where instead you should be taking control of your email and deciding how many times a day are you going to look at it. Right. And sometimes it comes to like training people. Like I tell my clients all the time, we respond to emails 24 to 48 hours. 48 would be a little long, but 24 to 48 hours. So if you have something urgent, email's not the place, right? Then call me or text me, because that's where you get me immediately. So if it's like, Ann, I need to meet with you next week, or yeah, like we have a question, but it's not urgent, whenever you get, that's what email's for.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I use that tip too. And we recently on my team, on my administrative team, I started shortening. We just automatically assumed things like one-on-ones needed to be an hour. Like we do the milestone meeting like separately, like a 15-minute but then we just assumed that one-on-ones needed to be an hour, and we shortened them to 45 minutes. And sometimes they're not even taking the full 45 minutes now. It's just this little change in like thought process. And again, just time management, not just, it's kind of like your client, right? Oh, I can fill an hour, but do I need it? You know? And
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way to think about structurally think about time management. And Zoom / remote work life has been horrible for things like scheduling those back-to-back meetings, because now you don't even need commute time, like even commute time
Right.
from my office to the meeting room, right? It's like, oh, I just am sitting at my computer, and there are days where my schedule looks like that, and I'm like, this is insane. I cannot be like on for 6 hours consecutively because there's literally no room to go to the bathroom.
So true. And I think, you just reminded me of something, is remembering to stick to that agreement, right? So if you set a 30-minute meeting that however, I have a time cube that I don't have with me today, but I tip it over so it blinks at me at 20 minutes, right? And so at 20 minutes, I say, hey, you know what? We have 10 more minutes to wrap up. Now, rather than letting it go to 35 minutes or 40 minutes or 45 minutes. And if we're not going to wrap up in 10 minutes, then we'll reschedule for another time. But it's almost like you have to start training people that your time's valuable. You're going to stick to your commitment. If you put a time out there, you're going to stick to it. And you're not just going to turn it into like a social chat time.
Yeah,
Save that for
absolutely.
another time. You can have social time, but just save it for another time.
Yeah, and schedule that too, right?
Yeah,
I think that's awesome. Okay, speaking of time, I want to make sure we have enough
yeah,
time because we did have a couple questions come in, so I'm going to keep us
for
moving.
sure.
You spend quite a bit of time training and coaching leaders. Some of the anisms, if you will, on leadership that you're known for include lead your people, listen to your people, love your people, lead yourself first, and leaders show up. These are just like my top 3 favorite anisms. Can you talk a little bit about how leadership impacts culture?
Oh my gosh, it's like the biggest impact, right? Because you could spend all day long and, like I said, putting together these great values, and then you hire leaders or promote leaders that don't like carry on those values. So if you're an owner on this call right now, like you can't do it all yourself, right? You eventually start hiring people to help you, and you have to, it's like that game of telephone that a lot of people know, where if I told one person sort of a secret, and then they tell the next person, they tell the next person, by the time we got through this whole Zoom room, it's very likely Katrina's at the end of my screen. So by the time it would get to Katrina, she will hear something totally different than what I actually said, because we all hear it a little differently and we alter it a little differently. So that's kind of when you start hiring people in your company, you have to hire people that will carry the message throughout. And here's the thing about leadership, and here's the thing about having employees, and I just was talking to a owner last night about this, is that you can never stop supervising them. Okay. Everyone goes, well, I just didn't know I was going to have to micromanage so many people. You're not micromanaging, you're supervising, and you will never not be able to supervise if you have employees. I have employees. I do this for a living. I have amazing employees. I still have to supervise them. Is there, for my, thank goodness they're both very high performers, do they have a lot of autonomy? Yes, absolutely. Do I still need to follow up though when I delegate things and important client tasks and things? Absolutely, because they get off track too. Not because they're trying to be bad employees, but like, I'll give you an example. I've talked about these handbooks that we've been doing. So one of my employees just kind of got sort of overwhelmed with the schedule. And as a result, I started noticing some things were not going to meet the deadline. And I was like, hold up, like what's going on, right? So we had to talk through what was starting to feel overwhelming so that I could help sort it out and we could clear the confusion and the chaos so that they could get back on path. It's just part of leading people, right? So it's such an important part of culture that you realize that your leaders need to really sound and act like you if you're the owner, and everyone needs to be sort of, they're not all going to be identical, but they need to be consistently standing behind the values and the work culture that you want to define and set up.
Yeah, I love that. And then for anyone else, just I dropped it in the chat. If anyone else has any other great taglines on leadership, we'd love to hear yours, or even any other favorite Annisms. And do you have any other of your favorite? I mean, I think I hit your top
I
ones
know you
or the
hit, I
most
know.
well-known ones.
Hit some of my favorites for sure. I don't know if I have any others. I mean, lead, listen to, and love your people is one of my favorite things. It's a topic I talk on a lot because, and I have to say, one of my favorite parts about the whole thing is the love your people, because people are often think I'm going to sit there and talk about, oh, it's all flowers and happiness. But really, one of the most important things I talk about in loving your people is identifying when it's time for them to go and letting them go, because we hang on to poor performers way, way too long because of our fear. And like right now,
Yeah.
this is like prime time for fear, right? Everyone's running short staffed. Where are we going to get the next person? Our client's going to be so mad. So we hang on to someone way longer than we should that isn't performing well. And I constantly see that come back and bite you all sort of in the behind, either through you have a workers' comp claim, or they file a wage and hour claim, or whatever, or they cause some other issue in the workplace. And it always comes back to they were never your high performer. They were always a challenge from probably day one, and you just kept them for some reason, and then they end up coming back to get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so hard because it's I think the critical lesson and takeaway, especially as an owner, for me from that is part of loving your people is knowing when it's time for them to move on, because a lot of times those folks who aren't performing well are our favorite people, right? That's why we hang on to them. We wouldn't keep them around if we disliked them. We wouldn't have hired them
Right.
probably in the first place. And
Yeah.
so that's a big part of it too, and that's a big challenge, especially for owners or for management. You sometimes you have these officers who are just not consistently showing up, but he's got a great reason, or she's we're very empathetic to our people, and so that's hard as well. So
It is.
transitioning from how leadership impacts culture, what are some other specific elements that most impact a company culture dynamic? And even better, do you have any takeaways for our folks here today that can help them build and or enhance a positive, radiant company culture?
Yeah, I love that. Wow. And definitely, I just saw Eddie's question. I definitely want to get to that if we have a chance. Okay. So I think that, I mean, some of the things you want to think about is how do we want to communicate with our people? And when I say that, I mean, I'm okay. Like some organizations want to be more professional and really, full, and some want to be a little more casual, whatever it is. How do you want to communicate with your people? How do you want to keep them informed? How do you want them to feel every day when they go home, right? Do you want them to feel excited to come back? Do you want them to feel, I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't want to say it, but in a very, very professional environment, people are not really friendly and they are not friends, and it's a different kind of relationship. I'm not saying that that's my favorite kind of culture, but it's nothing wrong with it. You just have to decide what it is. So how are we going to communicate with our people? And then how does that show up? How do we lead them? How do we hold them accountable, right? What's our process for even doing disciplinary steps, right? How do we do those steps, and how frequently do we give them feedback? How do we set up an environment where they can ask us questions? Do we really want them to ask us questions and bring concerns forward? And how do they do that? So a lot of it revolves around communicating, especially in the security industry. When you have a lot more people in-house, like there's some other things to think about too, but it can even come down to like, I mean, what you've heard me talk about silly things like swag or uniforms. Oh my goodness. Uniforms is a good example. I will say, in the times that I've been around, some security officers look really sharp and some security officers do not. That's part of your culture, right? That you spend time ensuring that they have the right
Yeah.
uniforms, that they fit, that someone's out there monitoring it, right?
Yeah.
It's so important. So
Absolutely.
important. Yeah, how they're going to talk about your company, how they feel every day when they leave. So I hope those are tangible enough, but it's really, and how do you figure that out? By the way, you can just ask your employees. You can start asking people, like, how
Yeah.
would you describe this company? Like if someone were to say to you, hey, do you like working for this company, what would you say? And then if they said, what is it like there? How would you describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the homework, right, for all of you listening in if I can summarize from everything Anne's been describing today, is every company has a culture. What
Yes.
is yours, right? So what is yours? And that's a great practical way to find out right now, right? Like ask somebody. And anyone. You could ask your employees first, but you could also ask your clients. You could ask your prospective employees. You can ask the people that are interviewing, what is your understanding of our company culture? And that's going to give you a really good holistic picture, I feel like, to understand, because maybe as owners or as management, we have these thoughts in our mind about what it's kind of like. It's like the handbook. Like we write the handbook, and that's how we intend for things to go, and those are the policies we want to shape our company. But then we have the day in and day out practices. And I love that question. I took note, Anne, of how do you want your people to feel at the end of the day?
Mhm.
And I think that's a really great question, and it sparked for me. I know, I want my people to feel accomplished. I want them to feel a sense of, Kate mentioned my phrasing for a radiant company culture. To me, if a company is a radiant and a positive company culture, it's not that they're not going to have hard days. It's not that they're not going to have conflict amongst team members, but ultimately, if we are fulfilled in the work that we do, and as leaders we're setting them up for that success, then to me that's what, at least in theory, we're here to find out from,
Yeah.
man, how do we do that? I'm a big picture dreamer, so I can envision it. Now, how do we
I
get there?
agree. I mean, I think something you just said so important. I think everybody should really hear this is you have a culture, whether you spend any time developing it or not. And that's scary, right? Because you want to have a culture that you've actually participated in developing, not one that's just sort of shown up every single day. So if you haven't participated in it, you want to do that. And in the security industry, because you send people out, they actually start taking on someone else's culture potentially, right? And I remember that's always the
Yeah.
hardest thing in security because you send them out to someone else's business, and then that's where that scope creep comes in, right? Like it's so funny, you all will crack up, but when I read handbooks from a non-security industry and the safety section says, never walk alone. I just read a handbook said this, always get the security guard to walk you to your car. I always write, is that in your contract?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, hold on. Like, first of all, I don't know if that's what the security guard's job is. And you have this in your handbook now. And I don't know. So anyway, but you really need to think about that, what that looks like. And if you think for a second that security officers are just, idiots, or even one of them's an idiot, that is communicated to them, whether you think it is or not. It comes through in body language. It comes through in the way you respond to their questions or don't respond to their questions. So there's got to be a shift in like, hey, you know what? We are all here to help the company be successful. And we want to treat everyone like they're our most important employee. And if we're having trouble with one of them, we have to hold them accountable, and either they're going to make it or they're not, and they might not make it. And then that's okay. We're going to let them go work somewhere else, or they're going to stay here with us and they're going to be a great part of the team.
Yeah, I love that. We are doing good on time. I'm going to push
Good.
through. We have two last official questions, and then
Okay.
hopefully we'll have a couple minutes just to tackle some of the questions that came in. And then Eddie, I noted down your question as well, or your note
Good.
that Anne wants to come back to. So this kind of all brings us back. I promised we'd make a full circle today. So burnout is a huge part of our industry culture, right? As an industry, we also have a culture. And some labor statistics suggest up to a 400% turnover nationally for the security industry. As CalSega members, we all aim to be industry leaders and set ourselves apart. So my question to you, Anne, is this: how do we avoid burnout for ourselves, our management team, and our security professionals in a nutshell?
I know. Well, first of all, I would definitely want to explore like who is feeling burnout and what level of burnout. And you could easily do that, by you could just give somebody a simple verbal survey. I don't think you need to spend a bunch of money or make it overly complicated and analyzing data. It's just like, hey, if I was going to give you a scale of 1 to 4, I try not to do 1 to 5 because everybody picks the middle, but 1 to 4, and 1 is, very burned out or however you want to do it, and 4 is feeling excellent. Just quickly, even you could even do today, like how are you feeling today? And you could do that with people. You could have your field support team do that with officers and just sort of do sort of an informal, what does it feel like out there? And then find out where everybody's at, because you don't want to assume everyone's burned out, because not everyone is, but you want to get a feel for it, right? And then I think that it kind of goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about, but every single person, I really believe every single person should feel valued in what they're doing. Every single person. I know that, maybe not all of us, I don't know if any of us are, saving lives. Well, some of you are saving lives. Okay. But you know what I mean? On a daily basis, we're not, brain surgeons or things like that. But we all do very important things. I mean, if you didn't have officers showing up, you don't have your clients happy. And if your clients aren't happy, you don't have clients. And then your security firm starts to get smaller or potentially go out of business. So we need everybody. And one of the things that helps people feel like I want to show up again and I want to give 100% is just that they feel valued, they feel seen, that somebody actually acknowledges that they're there and thanks them for being there. And I realize, again, when you have many officers out in the field, they might not get talked to every single day, but there's got to be some plan to reach them so they're not just out there for long, long periods of time, not having any interaction with somebody from the office, which I do find a lot when I do surveys. I find officers that tell me they haven't seen anybody in months. And I'm like, whoa, like that's too long.
Yeah.
That's too
We
long.
we call that like the security officer island. Like we don't want
Yeah.
our officers out on islands by themselves. Like we need a life raft. It's got to go out there at least periodically,
Yeah.
and make sure it's not like they're not like talking to Wilson, like
Yes.
to make sure.
And I know
Um,
sometimes it's like you're thankful that maybe you have this person, you don't really have to manage them too much and they're not causing any problems and there's no client complaints. But no news is just no news. It's not good news. It's just that there's no news. And that person still needs to feel important every single day, right? They still need to feel like
yeah,
you care.
yeah,
So you want to figure out a plan that and maybe there's other ways, right? Like we have texting. I mean, we have so many other resources that if you can't physically get in front of them, can someone FaceTime them occasionally? Can you text them? Hey, thanks for showing up today. Appreciate you. Thanks for making my job so easy. Like the fact that I don't have to come out there every other week because the client's unhappy. The client's always happy. It really is great for me. Like say things like that to people, because then they're like, oh my God, someone sees what I'm doing here.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of times we assume that people know, right? We assume that they
Right.
know that we are thankful for them or we appreciate the hard work that they do. And the reality is, like survey after survey, the best top psychologists will tell you. And then if you survey yourself, you'll know that's not true, right? We need to hear that. We need that affirmation
Totally.
as human beings. And that's definitely part of it. Okay, we are like right on schedule, just a minute behind.
Woo-hoo.
So final question for today, and then we'll transition it with whatever. We'll have a little bit of time for some of the other questions, but
Cool.
what is the number one takeaway for the leaders listening in today to build a great company culture, avoid burnout, and do all of this while leading their people with excellence? And I know there's not one magic pill, but takeaway, like golden nugget, what is the thing?
I would say absolutely don't lower your hiring standards. Make sure you keep your hiring standards even in the toughest of markets. Actively supervise your people. You cannot let them supervise themselves for 100% of the time. Like I said, there could be some autonomy. Your higher performers will need less supervision, but everybody needs feedback. They need to know how they're doing. So actively supervise your people. And maybe I should have moved this one closer to the front, but know what your culture is, right? What is it? What do you want to be known for when your employees are coming to work for you and leaving and describing you to other people? What do you want them to say about you? And are you sure that's what's being communicated throughout the organization? And if it's someone's not in line with that message, you've got to work with them to either get them in line or they shouldn't be working for you. Because if that's not their style to be in alignment with your culture, then they shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know it's hard to kind of wrap everything together, but I think the beauty of this conversation today is that really every single thing we talked about all ties back into company culture, which I know feels a little mushy on the surface, but the
Especially in this
reality
industry.
is, especially for a lot of us
Mhm.
very pragmatic people, right? There's a reason we're in security. Things
That's
are
right.
black and white. That's how we operate. That's why we're good at our jobs. And we can't ignore this other piece because it does impact things like retention. More importantly, maybe on your mind is your turnover, right? Remember, they're married to each other, right? The opposite of retention is turnover. So you're wondering how to recruit people. Well, let's start with keeping the ones we have. And then this is all part of that. So
Totally.
um,
I have
I
to respond to Kate's message she just put up there though, because I feel this is something I feel very strongly about. Kate, I adore you. I don't want you all to stop giving people gifts or things like that, but do not make it even that hard. Just literally, if you could just say to someone, I appreciate you. Thank
yeah,
you. Thanks for showing up today. Hey, you know what? You look fantastic today in your uniform. Thanks so much. Do not overthink because some of you start to get lost in, oh, I can't afford something for all my people. Or I've seen so many people go off into like trying to do an officer of the month program and you're lost in planning for 6 months, where all you need to do, honestly, is just make sure people know that you see them and just say
yeah.
something meaningful related to them. And then you can add all that other stuff on that by all means you can. But I want you just to like, no, I call it no grand gestures. No grand gestures required. It's
I
just a
love it.
quick verbal acknowledgement means so much.
I love that so much. So, for all of our listeners listening in right now, I'm going to drop in, listening in, sitting in, coffee chatting in.
And
Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna drop in the chat. So when Anne and I were preparing for this presentation today, Anne asked some amazing questions, and I want to turn around and pose those questions to all of you. And you don't need to respond in the chat, although I guess you could if you wanted to share. But these are some questions that I personally kind of wrote down in my notepad that I carry with me, and I've been reflecting on them a lot as we are coming to the end of the year. This is a great time to kind of revisit some of these things. And as somebody who absolutely has been feeling the waves of burnout, either in myself or seeing it in my team, I feel like this is such a timely conversation. We're going into the new year, as Anne mentioned, there's so many laws changing, there's so much happening where COVID is, we're set to expire or maybe change, make the emergency order become more permanent. Fingers crossed, which is gonna, even if we get what we want, it's still a change, and a change at this time of year after 3 years of all the things is hard. And it's hard for us and it's hard for our people, and it's more brain power and energy required. So I would love to encourage everybody to take a look at the questions I dropped in the chat, and even if it's just for a second right now to reflect on those. So we have 4 minutes. We had 3 questions. So we'll do like a power round.
love it.
First, I want to come back to Eddie's chat, not really question, but comment. So, Anne, he said, we also hold on to them because we have a fear of being sued unless we have the proper paper trail. Ready, go.
Right. Okay. So first of all, they'll still, if they're going to sue you, they're going to sue you no matter what. But you're right that you should have a good paper trail. And I'm going to tell you what I've been telling a lot of people lately. Your employee file should tell a story. It should be like a book. It should say Anne was hired. Oh, look, Anne got a raise. Oh, Anne was late to work. Oh, look, Anne got a compliment from a client. It should read like that. So think about your employee files like a book now. But I just want to say that if they're going to sue you now, they're going to sue you later. And sometimes hanging on to them doesn't change that. But
Yeah.
get on a plan and get them out if they shouldn't be there.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So one of the questions that came in before was just, they said more info for training for supervisors on how to empower them for difficult conversations with their employees.
Yes. So what I would start to do on that was a great question. Whoever asked that question, I think that you need to start practicing with them and say things like, give an example, so have some live examples of, I mean, you don't have to use names, but live examples of situations, and just ask your supervisors, like, how would you want to talk to them about that? And I hate to call it role play because I don't want it to get silly or feel trivial, but a lot of times when I talk to leaders, they say, Ann, I don't know what to do in this situation. I say, well, what do you want to do? And then they tell me, and I'm like, sounds good to me. And they're like, really? I can say all that? And there's nothing illegal about what they're saying. It's just honest. And people feel uncomfortable sometimes with just being clear. But, I keep saying this thing that Brene Brown says, which is clear is kind. So just be clear. And it's so, so important.
I love that. I'm writing that down. Clear
Yeah.
is kind.
Clear is kind. Like people like, well, I want to be kind. I want to be kind, but clear communication is kind. Right. So be
Yeah.
clear so people have a chance to. Every single time you're at supervisors, you want to tell them you're communicating about concerns because you're giving them information to help them be successful. Now, not all of them will rise to that occasion, but we want to make sure we've given them that chance. Holding on to the information isn't helping them at all.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. Okay, you're doing great in this power round, Anne. I'm like
Okay.
chucking them at you.
Okay.
Last one. So this is on everyone's mind. And again, I think similar to the company culture and leadership fixes, there is no magic pill. But the question was how to recruit. Take it away, Anne.
I
1
know,
minute
and
or
I don't know
less.
exactly what that all entails, but I'm going to tell you how we have been really successful in recruiting in my office. We receive resumes every day. Well, first of all, we create a very compelling job posting. And if you've seen me at Security University, we talk about this. If you haven't seen me there, please come. Create a compelling job posting. We receive resumes every day. We review them all every day. We contact people immediately. And we set up those interviews and we keep going until we find people. And we are one of the reasons that people hire us is because we're not emotionally invested. So we're not looking and like, oh, we're not making excuses for resumes. We see so many, just like if I were going to ask you about like the dangers of some area, you would be able to tell me all about it. You'd be like, oh, you know what you have to be worried about because you do that every day. So we know the excuses that people make that are signs that they're not going to be a good employee for you. The behaviors, all of that. We definitely weed that out. The reason we've been so successful is because it's something, again, I'm going to use that word again, but that ruthless on, like, we really work on this constantly. And most of you do not have that kind of time. Most of you will get 50 resumes. Maybe you'll review them all, maybe review 25, you find 5 people, then you call them tomorrow and then back and forth, you know what I mean? And then none of those worked out. And then you try to go back to the other 25 and now a week's passed. It's this, so you have to have someone on your team, if you don't outsource it, that can be dedicated. That's all they do. And you just keep going until you actually have offers accepted, and then cross your fingers that they show up, because as we know, that's a whole other thing that continues to happen.
That was the best power, like minute, 2 minutes of recruitment ever. And I want to send you my deepest gratitude. Thank you so much. You are just such a light in, the end of the year. Everyone is feeling some kind of craziness in December. I mean, I think that's kind of unavoidable.
So true.
So I just want to thank you for everybody listening in right now. Anne donates all of her time. She's not a compensated speaker, and she does it, like, I'm sure you can see it beams from her, because she's passionate about it, and she's passionate about helping leaders like all of you make the world a better place. I mean, and I know that sounds kind of fluffy, but ultimately that's what Anne does, right? She works really hard, because when people are passionate about what they do and they're not burnt out, and then they hire people and that passion spreads and grows, and then really cool things happen in the world when people like showing up and doing good work, right? So on that note, Allie, would you mind dropping in the chat for everybody the link to Security University? If you haven't attended or you haven't registered, maybe Allie can do that while Kate is gonna work on getting all of us into breakout rooms. So for those of you, if you have a hard stop, I know Anne has some fun personal plans, so she's gonna sign off. Any final thoughts? Yes, you're gonna head out now,
I
Anne?
know, but I mean, really, I just cannot reinforce enough what you said, Ashley, like valuing your people. You're going to hear a lot about, you've already probably heard a lot about it in 2022. It's going to become a really big thing in 2023. And it works. I guarantee you, I've seen it again and again and again. where it definitely works to just you just make small shifts in how you're leading your people, and you will see a turnaround for sure.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Yeah,
For
thank
everyone
you, everybody.
else, don't sign off just yet if you'd like to hang out for networking. But if you're like Anne and you have another appointment and you have to run, that is okay. But for those of you that want to network, we have some fun breakout questions. My committee is gonna take the reins, and bye, Anne, is gonna take the reins in the breakout rooms, and we have some follow-up questions or whatever is on your mind in these breakout rooms that you want to talk about. So feel free, and hopefully Allie can put the Security University info in, or the dates. I don't know if maybe don't have registration links yet, but sorry.
I'm going to jump in and just say,
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I just looked them up and I wrote down on my little dry erase board. Oh, I haven't blurred my little dry erase board because I wanted to tell you guys the dates. We've just confirmed them, so they're not on the Security University page, but we will make sure to have that all up there before the end of the year. We're still confirming one of our locations, but go ahead and calendar these, because definitely, this is a good event, whether you've been in the security industry for years and years and years, or you're new to the security industry, or you're new to leadership. Things change all the time. So, and sometimes it's just really good to get a refresher. So I do encourage anybody to come to Security University. Consider sending your staff. So we'll have a session in LA. So this is a 16-hour program broken up into 2 days. So they're long days, but it's good. Our speakers are really dynamic speakers. And as if any of you know, our president, David Chandler, we're going to feed you good food. So March 21st and 22nd, in Los Angeles. I do not have the location confirmed yet. And then May 16th and 17th in Sacramento, and that will be in the airport area. So again, March 21st and 22nd, and then May 16th and 17th. And the sessions are almost identical. So the order of speakers may change a little bit, but the content is the same, and the speakers that we'll have are the same. So please do plan to attend one of those events, or to send your staff to those events. We just as a reminder, CalSega is a nonprofit. This is a membership benefit. So we work really hard to keep the event as cost effective as possible. We don't need to make money on this. We just need to break even. So we'll work to keep the cost low, so that if you have multiple staff, you can send them. So, and then one other thing I wanted to mention, I've got us all separated into breakout groups. We're going to do 3 breakout rooms. Allie's going to lead one. Ashley will lead one. And then I've got Justin in the other one. It won't let me add myself to one right now. So I'll pop in and out of the different groups, and I'll give you an update when we're going to wrap up. But I did want to mention, as I said earlier, this event, the Coffee Chat events, are hosted by the Ambassador Committee. And if you're interested in joining the Ambassador Committee, there's room for you. We put on events like this. We put on an in-person event at the annual conference in October, and we will plan another in-person event for the 2023 conference. If you're interested in joining the committee, you can email members@calsega.org. Also, as an aside, if you have any needs, feel free to email members@calsega. That goes to our entire team. And so whoever is first available or the best fit to answer your question will do that. And so that's a really good way to loop in more than one person. So members@calsega.org. If you're interested in joining the Ambassador Committee, just give us a brief statement, 1 to 2 sentences about who you are, what your role is in the security industry. You can include how long you've been involved with CalSega, and just give us a couple sentences about why you'd like to be on the Ambassador Committee. If you want to throw in relevant experience that you have, you're welcome to, but that's not necessary. We just want people who you do have to be a member of CalSega to serve on a committee, but we want people who want to benefit the association and benefit the industry. And so I don't know if she mentioned it this coffee chat, but we really shifted our focus for the committee during the pandemic on member retention and member benefits. And so if you want to be a part of helping us do that, then please reach out to members@calsega.org. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open our breakout rooms. You should have the opportunity to click to join a room. If you don't do it, then it will just after a certain amount of time, it will go ahead and move you to the room. So I'm going to open them now and look forward to some good conversation in our rooms.